And now comes the bopping time. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunches, sponsored by Salary.com. I am David Turetsky, host, as well as my friend and co-host Dwight Brown from Salary.com. Dwight, how are you, my friend?
I am wonderful today. How are you doing today?
I am very good. It's baseball season. The New York Mets are 0-1, unfortunately, but you know,
Well,
what are you going to do?
my Diamondbacks are the same. The Cubbies beat them last night.
Yeah, it's just these things happen. So, but you know why our day is better, though?
You're going to tell me.
We have Mike Ohata with us. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
It is literally a pleasure. We've actually spoken to you before in an episode of the HR Data Labs podcast that's going to be coming out soon. And we had a really good time with that one, didn't we?
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed speaking with you folks.
It was one of those really extremely good podcasts where I said, "Hey, Mike, we got to have you on back really soon," and so we did. It was lightning fast. We had you back on, so
Yeah,
welcome.
The podcast is like going to be the prequel.
Yeah, well, this one's going to be the
exactly.
Mike, give us a 1-minute overview of who you are and how you've gotten to this point in time.
Sure. So I'm Mike Ohata. I'm a leadership coach, and I also am a talent strategist with St. Charles Consulting. And I do board advisory work as well. I'm the former CLO or Chief Learning Officer from KPMG, and also author of the book, The Talent Fueled Enterprise, which I partnered with St. Charles Consulting writing.
And so we'll, if you don't mind, in the comment section on LinkedIn, we'll put in the Talent Fueled Enterprise if you have the link to Amazon, so people can go check it out and hopefully you get some book sales from it. That would be great.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
But first, we do this on every Brown Bag Lunch. What's the last thing you did for the first time?
The last thing I did for the first time, I got my car registered in Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, which I've never
Nice.
recalled having to do. And it's quite the circular process. And of course, people
Really?
in the Aloha state are very friendly.
Of course.
I failed the first 2 times just trying to get the process started.
Did you have to take a test to do this?
No, you have to get a thing called a safety check, which is actually kind of an interesting process. It says they tell you you have to have valid insurance, your car has to meet safety standards before you can get your plates.
Oh,
so
sure.
I thought that was a really interesting process.
Interesting.
But I failed the first 2 times just getting the safety check.
By the way, it wasn't you who failed. It was your car who failed, right?
Yes. And by extension, I failed.
Well, that's funny because in the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, we actually have an inspection that you have to get every year. And people fail it a lot because there's emission standards, there's ball joints you can fail on. There's a lot of different things you can fail on.
Sounds very similar.
Yes, and it's also really awful when you get that failure because they actually put an R sticker on your car, and so cops can pull you over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, until
How's
you
that for the
actually get it fixed.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So let's do the bump music, and we're going to just enjoy it for a second while we transition to our topic. The bop time. So very quickly, we're going to transition. This is going to be a fascinating one, especially for people who are in the job market or don't know they're ready for the job market or might be in the job market, and they're soon to find out they are. And it's how to position yourself in the job market with skills, competencies, and data using analytics for the AI-driven recruiting systems.
Hey, this is William Tincup, and you should know about the You Should Know podcast. It's a topical, fun podcast with Ryan, myself, and a guest, or guests plural sometimes, and we tackle the most timely topics of the day. Give it a look, give it a listen, and subscribe. Thanks.
Mike, that's a lot of work to get done in a less than 30-minute podcast.
Yeah. I'm,
It's a
I'm
lot of
kind of
pressure, dude.
hoping, I'm kind of hoping and thinking that a lot of this is pretty intuitive to most folks. And my challenge to all of us is whether or not we're willing to put in the hard work it takes to position ourselves. And it kind of starts off with this general problem is that we spend a lot of time writing a CV or a resume, and then we kind of put it out there, to the ethernet, thinking that, hey, it's like prom. I'm good looking enough, I'm capable enough, I'm athletic enough, what have you, and someone should pick me up. Like, aren't I pleasant enough looking? And I would argue that it's more complicated than that. We all
Sure.
know that the recruiting tools are
Sure.
using, they've gone from sort of advanced search to sort of their own sort of starting AI capabilities, and they're doing kind of this fueled or energized sort of filtering process, that starts with keywords. And it's actually going to go needs to go beyond that for us as the people applying for roles at an
Right.
organization.
Do you see ever that, or will we ever get to a time when recruiters will actually take the initiative, knowing that they have requisitions to fill, to actually be more proactive and have the AI actually go out and search for the perfect candidate based on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Instagram, whatever the social media of choice is, or whatever the database of choice is, and actually do the work to find the right candidates and ask them proactively rather than the reactive or the, basically the the demand side of getting the resumes.
Yeah, David, you're a savant. I mean, that's literally the question
Idiot
that I would.
savant there.
No, just savant. We're going with just savant. No, it's literally the
It's okay.
question that I was thinking about today is because I'm wondering, and I think we all know the answers. How much are recruiters really going through and saying, don't just give me your generic thing, but here's really the very much of the profile, right? The skills that I need, the competencies that I need, the kind of maybe tangible experiences. It might be activity based or tenure based or what have you. But doing that kind of work on every JD that gets out there is probably like a no-go, right? It's sort of a non-starter.
Right.
And so then if we're recruiters, have just sort of resigned to the fact that we're going to allow whatever the the search algorithm is or the AI algorithm is going to be to find folks for us. And it's as good as whatever the black box is. And I think yeah, that's a big question. But if we were able to do that as recruiters, I think that'd be really fantastic. Now, it happens when we're doing executive recruiting on some
Of
level,
course.
but I would say most of the judgment is in the heart and in the mind of the exec recruiter, right? Right.
Hmm.
And using the network and people and their read on
Exactly.
leaders, et cetera. And and then they've kind of gone the other extreme. It's kind of a very human bound process, which is not wrong, but it's, they're finding people that they know through their network.
But the efficacy usually of going through the network and the who you know has typically been much more successful than the competency based or the what you know and then
Hmm.
trying to go to LinkedIn and trying to apply online. So meaning that I've had and I know a lot of other people have had much more success when people introduce me into a process because they know me and they know my reputation
Right.
relative to the hey, I just submitted a resume on LinkedIn,
CV. Yeah.
CV, right, or
Yeah.
application. I was looking for the word application on
Yeah.
your website. I haven't heard anything. Oh yeah, well the technology will let us know, and then we'll let you know. Five
Yeah,
seconds
so
later.
two really good points. Like one on I think on the executive recruiting side of it is um often leaders are pretty decent storytellers, right?
Hmm.
And what really comes into question is whether or not the recruiting folks have a pretty good discernment for how stories are told. So, and sometimes by way of network and introduction, the oral tradition sort of presides, but there is always that kind of finding out what was your role or what did you do really when you said you did
Hmm.
X, right? And that's kind of the thing. But let me take this part, which is really interesting, is because given all the technology, there's still this very human need for people to network in to
Yeah.
organizations, right? To get to
Right.
know people. The utility, I think, around this is really super important. If you can find network to the right people who are willing,
Right.
et cetera,
Hmm.
is actually get a feel for the organization and what they're looking for, right? And if
Right.
someone's sort of in proximity of the target role you're looking at, like what skills then are you looking for? What competencies, what kinds of experience? Getting that kind of information would be really helpful because, what it comes down to is that every role that, someone out there in the job market is looking for, they have absolutely have to spend the time to target the organization and to
Right.
target the job because
Hmm.
the
Right.
engine's doing the filtering. But if we're not really doing work to target, like that just kind of puts us farther away in terms of the matchup, sort of the blind matchup.
Dwight, what this reminds me of when we had
What's
that
that?
this when we had that discussion about the anecdotal slash relationship that HR apps have with dating
With
apps.
dating apps.
And so
Our favorite
Mike,
episode.
yeah, it was one of our
Besides
favorite episodes.
Mike's. Besides
Right,
Mike's.
yeah. Mike's was so much better, by the way.
We're
But
in the
but
whole prom dating theme here.
but
Right. Exactly.
to the point of the old boobies who used to set people up because they knew the family, they knew all the things about the
Right.
family, they knew the background of the family, and so they would set you up with their, for us, they'd set us up with their daughters and go, hey, you should meet David. He's a successful guy. He's in investment banking.
Hmm.
He does consulting. He does this. He's got a good prospect ahead of him. It's the old days. In the same way, if we have that experience with our network and we say to our network, hey, I'm out looking for a job, there's a girl I need to set you. I mean, there's a job I need to set you up with. Ostensibly,
Right.
Mike, what we're saying is that you need to put yourself in the place of what that company is looking for by fully understanding that company,
Hmm.
basically using the online tools as the booby or as the grandma, as the matchmaker, and then be able to have that translate into you now understanding the company better so you can better position yourself with
Hmm.
skills and with your CV to be able to be more enticing to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that to me really feels like table stakes. I mean, it's just like if we're not doing that, or folks out there who are working through the job market, if we're not doing that or you're not doing that, like it makes it really hard. I think from the kind of HR recruiting perspective, it makes me wonder, how invested you are in this job. And it's
Yeah.
it's it's got to be like every audition, or it's there's sort of a balance around that you have to be all in, right?
Hmm.
But also be authentic and not try too hard, because if you push that dial too much, then it feels like you're posing on some level, right? It doesn't really align. But it's really around like you have to find, or we have to find within ourselves, really around like I can do this job. I want to do this job. This is how I would come to it, right?
Hmm.
And if we can do that, and we get people to do that, I think they'd have a much better idea. And it's not just starting off. Let me give you an example. Like I'll use the product management one. It's like you could ask ChatGPT or Copilot to say, what is product management about? And what I find really fascinating, it could be everything from product marketing to program management.
Exactly.
Right. So are you
Right.
more kind of the agile developer side? You got to work
Hmm.
with development teams,
Yeah.
or are you thinking about market and share and
Right.
features and stuff? And
Right.
the
User
truth for the
stories.
organization, yeah, yeah, voice of the
Somewhere
customer,
in
all
the
that stuff.
middle with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're just kind of looking, asking like, the kind of user accessible, kind of AI tools to give you a summary, and you put that in your resume, that's
Hmm.
like 20% of the answer, right? That because that
Uh,
gives you at least some vocabulary. Now you got to go take the vocabulary or what you know and go back to the JD, to the organization, just like you talked about, and then say like, what do we think, this like how product management works in the
hmm.
organization. And you can go further, right? Like if we can find somebody, you can say, actually, we're looking for somebody who's more on the marketing side,
Yeah.
that can be, and then you have to kind of work through the skills. And I'll give you one more example is because I was kind of passionate about this. Someone sent me a chief learning officer role, and one of the things in there was they're looking to have a person who's actually can bring together kind of disparate federated learning teams. So that's kind of the project or the initiative or the big
Right.
change. but what's not in there, right, is the breakdown of, well, what is all the competencies, right, that is going to take that. Are
Right.
you operationally efficient? Do you know how to do business process optimization, stakeholder management, strategic planning? I mean, do you know change management? There's all these things that are layered in that, but none of those words appear.
Mm.
So this is where
Right.
you're like, okay, if you're positioning yourself, you kind of have to do some reverse engineering, as it were, and kind of put that in and find ways to kind of represent that. And if you're doing it through the recruiting route, it has to be in the narrative you tell,
Sure.
right? If it's in the resume portion, you're gonna have to put it in the narrative of the text.
Yeah. I mean, I think of you talked about the posing aspect of things versus the digging deeper. And if you think about the way that the entire recruiting process itself is built, at least for most organizations, it really is, it's incentivizes that posing.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
everything about the process looks at it from that camera lens as
yeah,
opposed to the other. And it's hard, because it's baked into the process, it is harder to get to exactly what you're talking about. But like you say, so much
It's
of
a
that is
lot of
up to the
work.
recruiter. It's
Mm.
a
yes.
lot of work. Yeah.
So take what you said, Dwight, and go back to David's savant question. What do we actually end up getting that comes through that filtering process, right?
Right.
And this is kind of like, when I was, working on the talent field enterprise, it's around like, there's this sort of fundamental problem. Like we start off with saying like, we hire the best people. You
Hmm.
wind forward and we go, I don't have the right resources. And I just go, logically, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So who are the best people? And it was as good as you got, or as good as we all collectively got in the ways the system works today. So
Yeah.
I think the fascinating opportunity is that the data actually helps us to get really close, but we got to put in the work, right,
But
on
Yeah.
both sides
but
of the
but
system.
Mike, so what this sounds like, if I'm a job seeker right now, I need to be a Sherlock Holmes and find the opportunities. I need to be a research librarian and be able to find everything there is to know and really understand your target. I need to be able to format my CV in a way, whether it's with hidden words or not, whatever it is, to re-engineer your keywords inside your resume. You really need to put on lots of different hats to try and win,
Right.
Yeah,
especially in a game where you have thousands of competitors, thousands, all who are vying to do exactly what you're doing.
yeah, that's right. I'm glad you brought up the hidden words example, because I had forgotten about that one, but that is a thing, isn't it?
Well, I keep
Totally.
on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
you keep seeing these. How do you engineer your resume?
yeah,
Well, you put them in, but you put them in an invisible font. You just make
right.
the
Hmm.
font white or whatever,
Yeah,
and
Right.
that tricks the AI. Well, I don't know how much it tricks it. You're basically trying to satisfy the keyword search that
yeah.
they're doing.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're trying to just get through the filtering process, right?
Exactly.
And so
Right.
that's, and I think it's not wrong, because that's how the system works, right? To Dwight's point. And so, but you have to put the effort in, but be thoughtful about it. Like, do the
Hmm.
homework, right? Like you said, like, go out and do your sleuthing to figure out like what it is you think that's really at stake for this organization, if
Hmm.
this is a role that you really want. If you're just throwing your name out there and your resume out there, then most most chances are is it's just going to go right through.
Well, and if you think about the process, so much of what we're talking about here is just getting in the door.
Exactly.
And, and if oftentimes the weeding out process in the interview is being able to go through the resume and sort of deep dive into things.
Yeah,
So if you're
If
doing
you
that on
get
the
to that
front end,
stage, Dwight.
if you
yeah,
get to that stage, but if you're doing that on the front end, not only are you going to be able to get to that stage, but you're also going to have a much better presentation of yourself in
Right.
the interview.
yeah. Dwight, you just had your savant moment, because that was the big thing that I wrote at the top of my notes. Is that the goal here is to get beyond the filtering and get to the interview.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's what you just said,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely the point. Is like, if you've done all the work, just like you said, you're much
Right.
better positioned to understand and represent what you think the job's about.
Right. Yeah.
I'm skeptical, very skeptical. every time. And in the past, obviously, I haven't submitted a resume in a while, at least for a few years. But I'm skeptical every time I submit myself because I hadn't been playing the game. I mean, I've been doing my research. I've been writing my CV that targets, but I hadn't been playing the game by putting those keywords in. And Mike, as you know, you get back that email 10 seconds later saying, thank you for your interest, but we are moving forward with other candidates. You have outstanding credentials, but right. So you really read my resume.
You're sitting there going blah 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 blah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Your resume fell to the floor.
Right.
Well, it
Exactly.
went right in the circular file. So
Yeah.
if it didn't hit the shredder first, but I think that's what discourages a lot of people, especially given a market where we hear about a lot of layoffs. We hear about the government losing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers. We see that while unemployment has not crept up yet, unemployment seems like it's going to be creeping up. And we feel like we're at full employment. So we feel like any job that comes available is scarce. And I think that really scares a lot of people who are not only in the market now, but who have been for a while. And it's depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. And if you are in the market, I mean, hopefully, the takeaway in this conversation is that, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but approach your job search like a job, right?
Right.
Like it's real work. And I would say, and this is like decades old sort of wisdom of sorts, is you got to work your network too. You got to spend the time getting to know people, understanding, and if nothing else, practice pitching yourself, right?
Yep.
Like if
Right.
you really want to be a product manager, introduce yourself as a product manager.
Right.
If you introduce yourself as, hey, I just got laid off from my, immediately the person listening is going, huh, I wonder what happened. Were you were you a government employee or what
Right.
happened? And you're having all these other questions. You're not listening to anything what the person's saying.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out what's the right narrative for me to
Exactly.
filter what the person's saying.
Right.
And
Right.
so, for all of us looking for work, if you're looking for work, is you got to be really intentional in your introductions, right? How you position yourself, around asking for help, and getting over that. And, my guess is half the people will ignore you and the other half might help you. And,
Right.
you're trying to find the people who are going to help you.
What's your position, Mike, on the whole open to work moniker that people put on their LinkedIn profile? Do you think that helps them or do you think that hurts them?
My really rudimentary sort of anthropological view of LinkedIn, right, is that people are willing to connect and so forth because they're trying to build strength of network.
Sure.
And in the same way that we sort of start liking things that people in our network are doing, kind of that network effect of sorts is that they sort of like you back, right? And, you know, and I would argue that that's a little bit of the kind of social engineering behavior that we need to embrace. Not in a way that's, I think you still got to find it in yourself, like what's authentic, what's real, and what's important. And there's a balance that says, hey, I can't pay attention to all of the stuff that's coming through. But for
Right.
those things that come up, and it might sound a little bit goofy, but I try to limit the amount of time, but I'll go through and kind of see what's popped up, and I'll kind of go through things like, yeah, that means a lot to me, and kind of do the thing. So I'm not just clicking everybody in the network, and I'm sorry for the people in my network that just heard that, but I'm trying to be authentic about it. No, but
It's
I'm
okay.
trying to be
I
authentic
understand.
about it and real.
Right.
And and if something kind of touches me or resonates, and they said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, because I think we can also, right, Dwight, you can kind of also figure out like when people are just sort of doing it to kind of,
Right.
kind of get through the behavior bit of it. And I think if we can do both, that'd be fantastic.
But LinkedIn being a social network and being what it is, status is important. Your title's important. Your background's important. I actually took my title out of my little description that's next to my name because it doesn't really matter what my job title is. It matters who I am. So we created some kind of other way of describing who I am. But I'm really worried for those people who have that open to work, Mike, that it's showing a vulnerable side to them that I think in some ways we feel bad for them, and again, I've been that person. I've struggled with that moniker, and so I don't know if it's over branding ourselves or rebranding ourselves as being out of a job, but I worry for people who have that open to work. I literally worry for them.
Yeah, this, and it might be the analogy may not be perfect, but one of the kind of senior people that I work with, who's a board member, board director, and her comment to me is, and others were like, when people know you're available, they'll seek you out. So, if you take the positive side of like being open to work is you're demonstrating, or one's demonstrating availability. And then I think the flip side is maybe more like what you're saying is it's like, it's like instead of saying who you are, right, which is what we just talked
Hmm.
about, and you just talked about, you kind of get into, well, what happened to you? Like, what's
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
story? And then
Right.
Right.
that can be kind of distracting. So I don't know. I mean, there's probably a better phrase than open to work,
Yeah.
or like,
Yeah.
and it's like maybe the old resume thing, seeking position, doing X, Y, and Z, or seeking a role, this kind of role, where again, the language aside, it's around the clarity of intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 I think one of the sorry, Dwight, were you going to say something?
No, I was just kind of thinking to myself about the whole open to work. And I think the other thing, and it really is kind of what we've been talking about, it almost conveys this sense of desperation
Mm-hmm.
that please come find me, please help me. And so I share your reservations with that, David, that it's like, is it really a help or is it a hindrance in the big picture? And maybe the answer to that is it depends. It depends who's looking at it. It depends where they are. If I'm looking for somebody to fill a position, maybe it is a good way to identify that. But
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
hard to
and
know.
maybe the point of empathy for us would be is around, as we were saying, is like if people are getting really frustrated in this process,
Yeah.
they're pulling out all the stops, right? Like, because what do they have
Right.
to lose, right?
Yeah.
Even if
Exactly.
and kind of the point that I think is coming out of this is around like how do you manage one's brand,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so, to me, that's related to how you respond to social media, right? As LinkedIn
Hmm.
is being part of it, and also
Right.
like what things you're willing to go and do and how you do it,
Right.
right? Because like, I mean, I make this point sometimes, and it sounds tongue in cheek, but it's not meant. I just said like it feels off point for me, or if it's not on brand. And I'm not saying that to be off-putting. I'm just trying to be really clear. Is in my attention. I may help you with this activity, but I'm not going to do it the way you asked me to because that's not really how I'm seen and want to be seen.
Hmm.
So I think that's another thing that, like, if folks out there looking for roles or jobs, like, think about what's really core to your brand and who you want to be and what you want to be known for.
Hmm.
Is there a service or is there an industry that people could leverage that helps them with what LinkedIn does brand them as? Like, is there a employee branding? I know there are people who kind of work on employee branding, but would you suggest anything in particular or any industry or anybody who, if someone wanted to brand themselves differently on a social media site like LinkedIn, that they could reach out to do that? Is there a service like that?
I don't know of a specific one to answer the question directly. If you think about the whole CV resume writing process, that is a branding exercise.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, to the extent that you have people who are really good at helping prepare like bios, right, and CVs and so forth, and sometimes these come through to various degrees, kind of the level of kind of an outplacement service.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If it's sort of volumes of people, my sense of it is that quality might be a little bit differently pitched. If it's like leaders and senior managers and so forth, that level of service might be a little bit higher pitched,
Of
right,
course.
in
Hmm.
terms of doing that branding. But I think all of us should know based on from the whole keyword, right, through kind of either ontology or semantic network and so forth, like if we're thinking through this, like then we are really, and we've done our homework, we're really around kind of positioning ourselves. So it goes right back to the branding part of it.
And I would tell anybody who's in that position right now that everything you do online, whether it's on LinkedIn or not, is part of who you are and who your employer or potential employer will look at. While they probably aren't able to do searches on Instagram or Twitter for you or TikTok, just remember that if you have a reputation on all of these sites and they're bad, when you come to LinkedIn, it's not disconnected necessarily. Even though this is a professional work site and those are not, everything you do online is discoverable. And I don't mean that in a court way. I mean that in a way that your employer can, or potential employer can find you.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap up, Mike. And, again, it's always a wonderful time to talk to you. I guess in closing, is there anything that you would kind of suggest to people other than the branding and the keywords and the other things we talked about before? Anything else that we didn't talk about yet?
No, well, there is one quick thing that kind of came up in my mind was around really understand and manage how you want to be authentic, right? Because I would argue that since we were talking about LinkedIn, is that there's a level of sharing that's supposed to represent authenticity, and it just feels a little strange.
A little bit of oversharing.
Yeah, and that sounds harsh and probably judgmental because it absolutely is on some level.
Yes.
But what I step back and look, I said, you're really working to be authentic.
Yeah.
I would have picked something different to be authentic
Sure.
about. So, but I
Sure.
appreciate the gestures of authenticity. But back to what you're saying, David, like you got to think, we have to think through that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some things that get posted on LinkedIn, I kind of say back to myself, what was this person thinking? Any future employer or any customer is going to read that if they do any research on you. Don't be mean. Don't be a jerk. Be nice. And if you can't be nice, do what my mom said. If you can't be nice, or if the thing that's going to come out of your mouth isn't nice, don't say anything.
Yeah. Be full of grace is what I would say.
Exactly. Yeah. Mike, thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here. Thanks, Dwight. Thanks, David.
Thanks for being with us, Mike. This is great again.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you.
And if you don't believe us, just wait until Mike's episode comes out on the HR Data Labs.
Right.
You're going to love it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Take care and stay safe.